Some performances entertain, others define careers. And then there are the more rare moments that change everything. U2 had spent nearly a decade fighting for recognition, crafting anthems of hope and defiance, and honing their electrifying stage presence. But on July 13, 1985, in front of a global audience of nearly 2 billion people, they stepped onto the stage at Wembley Stadium for Live Aid and unknowingly played the most important set of their career. What should have been a standard 3-song performance turned into something unforgettable when Bono made a split-second decision to leap into the crowd, pulling a struggling fan to safety and transforming Bad into a breathtaking, unscripted moment of human connection. In that instant, U2 wasn't just another rising band, they became icons. U2's early struggles and rise.
The whole business depends on the survival of the fittest. And if you can't escape from whether it's Dublin or Lubbock, Texas, or Iowa, well then you will not survive in the bigger arenas. So I'm thankful for any of the struggle we had to go through to get from Dublin to London first, from London to New York to Los Angeles, whatever.
U2's journey from a group of teenage school friends to one of the biggest bands in the world was anything but overnight. Their story was one of perseverance, evolution, and a relentless desire to create music that resonated beyond just catchy hooks. Formed in 1976 in Dublin, the band consisted of 4 members: Paul Hewson, known as Bono on vocals, David Evans, better known as The Edge, on guitar, Adam Clayton on bass, and Larry Mullen Jr. on drums. They were young and passionate, heavily inspired by the energy of punk, but determined to forge a unique sound of their own. Unlike many of their contemporaries, U2 wasn't just looking for quick fame or a rebellious image. They wanted to make music that meant something, music that could change the way people felt about the world around them. Their earliest releases, Boy and October, established their identity, but didn't bring them widespread recognition. These albums contained glimpses of what U2 would later perfect: soaring melodies, introspective lyrics, and anthemic soundscapes, but they lacked mainstream appeal. Though they had started to attract a small but devoted fan base, especially in Ireland and the UK, their attempts to break into the lucrative American market had been largely unsuccessful. They toured extensively, playing small clubs and opening for bigger acts, but they remained on the fringes of the music industry. That began to change with the release of War in 1983. This was the album that gave U2 their first real taste of success. Songs like New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday became instant anthems, showcasing the band's ability to blend politically charged themes with deeply emotional music. The Edge's signature guitar sound, echo-heavy and ethereal, began to take shape, and Bono's reputation as a dynamic frontman grew. With War, U2 was no longer just an up-and-coming band, they were now a formidable force in rock music. But rather than rest on their laurels, U2 took a different approach with their next album. In 1984, they released the unforgettable Fire, a record that marked a significant departure from their raw, aggressive style. Produced by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois, the album leaned into atmospheric textures and experimental songwriting. Pride in the Name of Love, a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr., became their first major radio hit in the US, introducing them to a broader audience. But while the album showcased their willingness to evolve, it didn't yet establish them as global superstars. Live Aid, the day U2 became legends.
I have to ask, what inspired you to be playing here today?
Well, I think the question is why wouldn't you play here today? I think that's the question everybody's got to ask themselves, Why aren't they watching it? Or why aren't they a part of it? I think, most of the world is a part of it. And if you're not, I think the question is, it's got to be pointed, to whoever.
Live Aid was one of the most ambitious music events ever staged. Organized by Bob Geldof and Midge Uri to raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia, it was a concert unlike anything the world had ever seen. Hosted simultaneously in London's Wembley Stadium and Philadelphia's JFK Stadium, it featured some of the biggest acts in music: Queen, David Bowie, Elton John, The Who, Led Zeppelin, and more. With an estimated 1.9 billion people watching across 150 countries, it was the largest television audience in history at the time. For U2, this was more than just another gig. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to prove themselves on a massive stage. Positioned between Bryan Adams and the Beach Boys, The band was given a 20-minute set. Their plan was to perform 3 songs: Sunday Bloody Sunday, Bad, and Pride in the Name of Love. They opened with Sunday Bloody Sunday, a powerful and politically charged song that had become one of their defining anthems. It was a solid start, but it was what came next that changed everything. As they launched into Bad, a track from the unforgettable Fire, something extraordinary happened. Bono, dressed in a flowing white shirt, black leather pants, and sporting his signature shaggy mullet, lost himself in the moment. He moved to the edge of the stage, peering into the vast crowd of 72,000 people. Then, in a moment that would go down in rock history, he leapt off the stage and into the pit. From the television broadcast, it was difficult to tell what he was doing at first. But as the camera followed him, viewers saw him frantically waving to security, pointing to a young girl being crushed against the barricade. That girl was 15-year-old Cal Kalik, who had been pushed forward by the surging crowd and was struggling to breathe. Bono signaled for security to pull her out, but he didn't stop there. Instead of rushing back to the stage, he took her hand and slow danced with her right there in the pit in front of thousands at Wembley and millions watching around the world. While this was happening, the rest of the band was left on stage playing the repeating melody of Bad and unsure what was going on. The Edge later admitted they thought Bono had abandoned the performance entirely. The tension among the band members was high. They were worried they had lost the crowd, that the moment had become awkward. But for those watching at home, it was anything but. One of those watching was folk legend Joan Baez, who later wrote about her reaction to what she had witnessed. Quote, "This young man is expressing himself with such tenderness, it's enough to break my heart. He calls to the audience, they call back. He's directing a choir, they are the choir. I can't recall ever having seen anything like it in my life." By the time Bono returned to the stage, the band's allotted time had run out, and they had to cut Pride in the Name of Love from the set. As they walked off, they believed they had blown their biggest opportunity. The Edge recalled, quote, "We were really depressed. Bono felt like it had been kind of clumsy and that generally the whole thing hadn't lifted up." But the world saw it differently. The aftermath, U2's sudden rise.
A few years ago, they were just an obscure rock and roll band from Dublin. This week, in New York, the Irish group called U2 won 2 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. They've sold more than 20 million albums and in the past 2 years grossed over $40 million worldwide. Their spectacular rise may be due as much to their message as their music. They sing about injustice and commitment and somehow seem to be capturing the emerging consciousness of a generation.
When U2 left Wembley, they were convinced they had failed. The band members were silent, exhausted, and frustrated, believing they had squandered the most important opportunity of their career. Of Bono's interaction with the audience, and media outlets hailed it as one of the defining performances of Live Aid. Newspapers and music critics highlighted U2's ability to create an emotional connection, something that many of the other performers, despite their immense talent, the Live Aid performance became a pivotal moment in their trajectory, turning them from rising stars into one of the most promising bands of the era. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about U2's Live Aid performance? Let us know in the comments section below.